Ladies and gentlemen, we're over halfway through 2022. Isn't it time we start reconnecting? Since March of 2020, the vast majority of our interpersonal interactions have been virtual. We've used Zoom, FaceTime, emails, cell phones, you name it, we've been doing it. Now, while this is better than being in total isolation, nothing is better than a face-to-face meeting. Looking someone in the eye, shaking their hand, or a friendly hug. It's time for us to get together again because our mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being is at stake. Well, Dennis Pitocco, I'm sorry.
Close enough. You got Dennis.
is the founder of a very successful 360-degree nation. He has mastered virtual dialogue. And now he's leading a movement for friends and colleagues to meet again face to face. Let's hear what he has planned. Dennis, welcome to Secrets for Walking on Water.
Frank, thank you. And can I just say what you just said in your introduction, you could not have said it better. In fact, I'd like to steal that from you because you just nailed it. You captured the essence of what we've been feeling for quite some time now. And I mean, good for you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Coming from you, that's very high praise indeed. And feel free to use anything that I use. I steal from many people, including you. Dennis, you created this incredibly successful virtual organization that has made deep connections with hundreds of people from all over the world who have never met yet. They've never physically met, yet they're so willing to help and support each other. How did you do this?
Oh, wow. Well, let me give you a little background. I grew up in Pittsburgh, one of 8 children, and there was no illusion that we could afford or go to college. So like my other 4 brothers, we all joined the armed forces. I happened to join the Air Force. So right out of high school, I spent my 4 years serving my country. And then because of at the time, a great placement program the Air Force had, they put me into a banking career, very low level, but it was a career with the fact that I didn't have a college education. I found very quickly I had to just get the job and then work as hard as I could to distinguish myself from the people that had the education. So in the end, Frank, I spent about 30 years in banking and international banking, rose through the ranks back at the time where you could actually work hard and rise. And I started a number of businesses. Long story short, probably about 15 years ago, I sold everything, settled down here in Tampa Bay with my wife, Allie, who I met when I was running one of my businesses in the UK. And we were blessed with the opportunity to make choices that very few people have at a relatively young age. We wanted to figure out, it's like the dog chasing the car. We caught the car, so what do we do with it? So we did what we continue to do today, Frank. We take a morning walk every morning, and it's to get away from all the noise and to kind of get a clear head and think about things. And we started doing that back then here in Tampa. And we decided, after a lot of discussion, we wanted to do 3 things that we really enjoyed. Number 1 was we wanted to discover the world. And I'm starting with the rest of the world beyond the USA first, so we can get a better perspective of life. We've all done business travels. I know you have, but you see the taxi, the airport, and the meeting room. You don't see the country. And we had done all that. So now we wanted to intentionally map out the world beyond the USA and begin to travel. So that was number 1 we said we'd do. Second of all, we both independently over the years in our careers, before we knew each other, had a genuine interest in giving back to nonprofits. And I don't mean just writing a check. I'm talking about your time, your talent, your treasure, but then we were restricted because of our jobs and commitments that we couldn't do it as well as we would like. So then we said, we're going to do something with that. And I'll come back to that in just a minute. And then we said, well, a lot of people, when they're in a position like this, where they're not necessarily needing to work, they start doing retirement things like Sudoku and crossword puzzles. Well, we weren't going to do that to keep our brains active. So we thought we would use technology to help what we now call rediscover humanity with the benefit of developing a website. And you're talking to somebody both of us that had no technology background, but we had a commitment to figure it out. As far as the nonprofits, we started volunteering here in Tampa. Tampa's a very generous community, a lot of big companies. So doing fundraising here is not a big challenge, as opposed to maybe if you were in Boise, Idaho, or perhaps Mumbai, India. So we decided we would roll up our sleeves. We did that. I've served on boards across the community. My wife has served. We've been delivering meals through one of the largest Meals on Wheels operations here in Tampa for over a decade now. And so we're doing everything we can to balance all three of those things. And it's been a remarkable ride.
It has been incredible. It has been absolutely incredible. And people are drawn to you and to Allie. There's something about you and what you do. And what's impressive to me is the caliber and the quality of people, because we've never met. And I haven't met many of these hundreds of people that I interact with, yet everyone is so willing to help. Does that come across to you?
It does. Well, we feel that. We feel that every single day. And frankly, Frank, that inspires us. And that's where we get a lot of inspiration from, to dig deeper, do more. One conversation with you, and I'm taking notes on the side here. You might say one thing, Frank, that I'm going to take away from this and say, wow, I never would have thought of that. Let's see what we can do with that thought. Well, we get that feedback all the time, either accidentally on purpose, from these kind of interactions. So it's been, and that's been our roadmap. We don't have a business plan. Our plan is to simply react to the way the world is changing, and then take the privilege we have of being on top of this giant thing to do good with it, whatever that means.
I've heard you say, Dennis, you are constructively disruptive. And I love that term. I love that term. Now, for those of you who don't know Dennis, the 360 Nation touches on some extremely volatile topics and conversations, yet they're very civil. How do you manage to pull that off, Dennis?
Well, another great question. When we launched the publishing of 360 Nation, which is called Biz Catalyst 360 over a decade ago, talking about constructively destructive, the way that happened, Frank, is we wanted to build a website. But we didn't want to be your typical run-of-the-mill humdrum with pop-ups and sales pitches and dated information. We wanted it to become our occupation versus an occupation, and we were blessed to be able to do that. So we decided to build something for good versus for profit, which gave us the freedom to open the doors wide to publish what makes sense, S-E-N-S-E versus sense, C-E-N-T-S. And then we pass that freedom along to our writers by affording each of them the opportunity to just spread their wings and write about whatever mattered to them, regardless of subject matter, regardless of format. It can be poetry, it can be a podcast, it can be 100 words, it can be 2,000 words. All the shackles that many writers told us over a decade ago that were restricting their ability to create, we were able to take those shackles off because we weren't governed by a marketing board or somebody saying, well, that's not going to make money. Anyhow, some people, not us, but some people have called it, and we didn't know at the time, we created a writer's nirvana, because our editorial policy, now we've got a lot of big words that everybody has on their websites, but it can be summarized with just two ways. Whatever you write just has to be respectful and not mean-spirited, period. Beyond that, if I was saying to you, Frank, just write about what's going on in today's world. It can be politically sensitive, of course. Now, we didn't know how powerful that would be, Frank. And then as more and more censorship started creeping into the major media that we all see these days, and all the ultra sensitivity to conversations about virtually anything, we're just amazed at how many highly credentialed people from major media organizations have come to us and say, Dennis, we just want the freedom for our voices to be heard without these over-the-top editorial restrictions. So we said, bring it on. We created a brand new channel a couple of years back. It's called Viewpoints 360. And that's where we park a lot of that content. So people that want to get into intelligent adult conversations, respectful, can go there.
And that's been, and just an amazing thing is, and you also have a Thursday conversation
Yes.
that has
Yes.
some very volatile conversation, very volatile topics. And
Yeah.
the thing that just amazes me, Dennis, is you put together an organization where on some of these topics where people are yelling and screaming at the top of their lungs, and the whole discussion is who can yell the loudest. That doesn't happen here. It just
Yeah.
doesn't.
Well, thanks. Just to touch upon that, we actually had created two things, Frank, 2 years ago, and this is pure coincidence. We weren't brilliant. It wasn't part of a business plan. But on or about April 1st, April Fool's Day 2 years ago, which happened to be just about at the beginning of the pandemic coming aboard, we launched this Thursday thing you talked about. It was our first foray into Zoom meetings. I mean, everybody was doing them, but again, we didn't want to be everybody else. So we said, we're going to do this different. We created what's called the Friendship Bench. And the idea was to bring anybody on that wanted to come for 60 minutes every Thursday. And there wasn't going to be an agenda, and there wasn't going to be any leadership discussions. It was going to be, come on, let's sit down and let's just chat about whatever's on your mind. Very often we would bring some leading questions in it just to stir the crowd up. The objective was to get people to come together and get them away from all that noise, almost like my morning walk with my wife and I have. Now, as we got going, Frank, we were probably about 3 or 4 months into that, again, 2 years ago. And some of the noise outside the Friendship Bench that was going on, like police issues, like political issues, there was so much noise going on. We didn't really want to bring it into the bench, but we couldn't ignore it. And the reason we didn't want to bring it in is in 60 minutes, you can't do some of these topics justice. So we said, all right, we're going to keep the bench going as is. We may touch upon some of this stuff, but we're going to launch a second forum. And rather than be 1 hour every Thursday, we're going to do 2 hours every 2 months. So it's going to be plenty of time. And we're going to invite those elephants into the room so we can have a deep discussion. And I'm going to emphasize the word adult discussion about them. That's been going on now for about 2 years. In fact, our next one's tomorrow. It's called Salon 360, and it's just a different vehicle, not quite the same people. And boy, what a learning experience that's been, because to say you're going to bring the elephants into the room, one thing, to equip people with the ability and the skills to have an adult conversation was an assumption that we had to turn upside down over the past 2 years. And it's been a remarkable experience.
It really is interesting to hear people with very, very strong opinions, but they listen. And the beauty of your program, in my opinion, the beauty of your program is people are listening to learn and to understand. They may not agree.
Thanks, Frank. That's the key word. They're seeking understanding. And as you know, and as I can say, and as probably the people who are watching this, where in our lifetime, as we were coming up as a children in grade school and high school, where did we ever learn how to agree to disagree? Everybody uses those terminology, but where did you ever learn? If you're on a debate team in college, you want to win. Well, we don't want winners. So as this Salon 360 began to take hold, and every couple months we're meeting, we realized very quickly, hey, look, none of us, including me, have the skills to talk about the race issues. Yeah, we want to talk about them, and there's plenty of time. So we turned Salon 360 upside down. The tagline for Salon 360 happens to be shift happens. Well, we shifted it completely, and it's only in the last session 2 months ago that we finally shifted back to talking about the elephants. Why? Because we spent the next, 6 sessions learning how to talk to each other. And I keep looking to my right, because up on my bulletin board here, I have 8 bullet points I've written down, things I've learned about how to have a discussion. And Frank, you've already hit on the first one, and that is, if Frank said something to me in one of these forums, and it was on the opposite side of maybe the political spectrum, and I was just absolutely in disagreement with him, rather than, beat him up, so to speak, my first question would be, Frank, help me understand how you got there. And then my job is to shut up and listen, another skill. And as you know, that skill isn't well developed. And if I can shut up and Frank goes on for the next 5 minutes, that's okay. Now, it doesn't mean that Frank and I are going to leave this discussion or that discussion singing Kumbaya, but I'll bet you we're going to be a step closer to each other, because now we've learned how to respect each other and still understand. And Frank will probably say one thing that'll make me stop and think and say, wow, I understand now why he said that. I may not totally agree with it, but I'm going to tuck that away. And now I'm a little bit smarter. Frank and I are closer as friends, and we move on. And I can tell story after story where that's happened. And there's a lot more bullet points like that, but we always start out with, help me understand.
Absolutely. And it's something where once Sajal Thacker is a great example, because she talks about civility. That's her whole life is about civility.
Yes.
And you can't have civility unless you have adult discussions and dialogues, because then you at least are saying, okay, I see where you're coming from, and that may take away some of the vitriol.
Exactly, because you're listening and you're actually digging a little deeper. And think, Frank, we have to sprinkle in the impact of the pandemic. I've talked to people that are smarter than me on the psychology side of the pandemic. And I said, it's our feeling. This is our feeling sitting on the perch. We said that people have become so ultra sensitive to everything, and they're ready to lash out. We call it simmering. And this lady I know that said, Dennis, what you're touching upon is the fact that for the last couple of years, a lot of people, particularly type A personalities, they've felt a loss of control. And because people, whether it be the government restrictions, the travel, the vaccinations, they're being told to do things, and they're not used to that. And so they're kind of boiling over. And if Dennis says something to them that 3 years ago would have been a conversation, now it's an attack. And it's interesting psychology. So we're back to then, if that happens because of the pandemic, do you, Frank, Dennis, have the ability to still lower the temperatures, they call, and have a discussion? And lowering the temperature has become one of our mantras, frankly.
It's absolutely wonderful. Now, Dennis, you've won multiple awards in the virtual world. Yet something inspired you to get on the road and go meet your members face to face. So what was the inspiration, and what did you learn?
Thanks so much. That was, everybody says game-changing, life-changing. Well, let me put some meat on those potatoes, because like so many other people during the pandemic in particular, my wife, Allie, and I felt, I'll call it sequestered for a long time. She's from the UK. We used to go over to the UK 2 or 3 times a year to visit family. Well, that stopped because we weren't allowed. So we're taking away, frankly, a big part of her life right there. And then just domestically, the challenges of travel. So, and remember, I said way back that 3 things we wanted to do was discover the world. Well, that all stopped. So we finally got to the point early this year, and we said it was time to, as they say, get out of Dodge, and do differently, not take an airplane like all the Americans do. We want to get on a train. We're going to do something people don't do in this country unless they're commuting from New York to New Jersey on Amtrak. Most people in this country don't think of trains. In Europe, as you would know, Frank, people travel by train as a necessity, plus they're good train rides. Here, whole different adventure. So we decided we were going to take a train trip coast to coast, and we ended up doing 7,500 miles, and we called it the 360 Nation Discovery Tour across the USA. And our objective going by train was, we had the luxury of time. We were going to spend the entire month of April. We built in enough excess time because the trains in this country typically run late. As I've said to many people, when you travel on Amtrak, you need 3 things: a ticket, a lot of patience, and a great sense of humor. Let me tell you, we used all 3 of those, Frank. But we also wanted to go by train because trains go into these small towns that you won't see by air, and you probably wouldn't see by car because you'd be on the major highway. But these small towns, you stop, and it's the general store, and it's the hardware, and it's the things that you just don't see. So it allowed us to see, I'll call it middle America, which was wonderful, something we haven't done. But what did we discover? Wow. Every time we travel, and this is internationally or locally, we always look at all this community we have. We kind of circle the city or the town and say, there must be something there, somebody there we know. Either they write for us or we just know them. And we did that. So we ended up, over the course of this month, we met with over a dozen of our people that we know, many of which write for us. And they were just coffee gatherings. Frank, you and I would eat together for an hour in a local coffee shop and talk. Well, I didn't realize, and I probably should have, but we didn't realize until we came back, just how isolated we've all become. Part of it was isolation because you had to be isolated. Part of it was the rules have changed. Now you come out, but guess what? We've adapted to Zoom calling. We've adapted from working home. So a lot of the people that otherwise would be going back, I say, hey, this is pretty good. I'm going to stay here. But isolation kicks in. And then we discovered something that you mentioned, just the magic behind a handshake or a hug. And we witnessed when we came back how every one of those relationships came alive. They were energized because we had face-to-face contact. Some of it was catching up. None of these folks we'd ever met with, but we've been on Zoom with. So let me say, when it comes to Zoom, it's done a great job, like it's doing right now, of filling that gap. But you just can't beat that handshake and a hug. And I just can't say enough good things about it. And in fact, we were so inspired by that, Frank. We came back. We've now done another 360 Nation Discovery tour across Florida. We were amazed how many people here we know. We've got one set up to do next month. We're finally going back to the UK, and I've got a tour going on there to meet a bunch of people because it energizes us, but it also validates we need to get out more.
Absolutely. Now you have a conference coming up, and this is interesting because pre-COVID, we've all been to conferences and events, and they were a nice diversion from the office, but they didn't accomplish a hell of a lot, basically.
I agree.
So tell us, you do things differently. Tell us what this is, what you're doing with this event in Tampa on March 22nd and 23rd.
Yeah, it's called Encounter 360, and it's going to be March 22nd, 23rd next year, which are the very best times. This is a well-kept secret, but that's the best time of the year to visit Tampa. The snowbirds are gone. The weather's beautiful. There's no humidity. All the things we normally don't tell people in any event. But let me go back to that. Let me go back to my banking career. I spent 30 years in banking. Because of my position, I got into the executive ranks. I had to go to conferences across the USA. And over time, I developed a real distaste for them. There was too much what I'll call glad handing, too much politics, too many sales pitches, too many boring, repetitive speeches about the same old things. So, and then over the years, since we've had 360 Nation, the bigger we got, guess what? I had a bunch of conference promoters approaching us saying, well, you've got this great community. Think about what we can do. Make all this money and bring them together in a conference. And I kept saying, nope, not interested. That's not what we do. We're not money makers. We don't leverage our audience. And frankly, my distaste for conferences overwhelms the whole thing. But then came this trip across America and this isolation awakening, as I will call it. And we both came back and we did our morning walks, and my wife and I both decided, we're in kind of a unique position here. We're almost obligated to take this thing we built and do some more good with it by creating an opportunity for people to get together so they can have a place to go. But we didn't want to use the word conference because to me, that brings back what you said, Frank, kind of these worthless gatherings, blah, blah, blah. So we took that constructive disruptive approach again. And we said, we're going to do something different. First of all, I'll never use the word conference. It's going to be an encounter. Second of all, there's going to be, I spent more time if you go to the webpage on this, defining what it wouldn't be versus what it would be. And things like there's going to be no keynote speeches, no PowerPoints, no team building exercises, and all that typical humdrum, boring stuff that you've seen before. And we think the world shifted enough that we don't want to go back to that. And then we decided, well, how do we get past the fact that this is our occupation versus an occupation? Our occupation versus occupation. So we don't want to make any money because money is icky to us. We don't do things for money. Talked to a lot of good people, and we finally came up with the ideas. Look, we're going to charge only what we need to break even. If there's a shortfall, we're just going to cover it. But if we're going to make more than we need, we're going to go back to the nonprofits that we deal with and to distribute that money to good nonprofits. Good means the money goes where it belongs. And that was the final piece of the brick that said, wow, we can do this now. And then we went out to a bunch of people we know and said, here's what we're doing. What do you think? We didn't know what to expect, Frank, because we've never done anything like this before. And I'm happy to say that as of this morning, I'm sorry, let me back up. We limited this whole thing to 50 people. People said you should do more. We said, no, we want to keep it intimate enough that if Frank shows up, he has time to circulate through the group over a period of 2 days. So we limited it to 50. I'm happy to say this morning, we've sold 2/3 of those seats. There's only 16 seats left, and we're still almost, 9 months away.
Yeah.
We did it early. We announced it early because we want people to look at this as not just 2 days spending with the group, but it's a great time to take your family away in Florida.
Yes,
And that's how it came together.
It is quite an event, and from the people, well, unfortunately I can't make it, but of the people that I've spoken to who can make it, they're all excited. Now, this is going to be in Florida. Are you going to be holding these events after this is completed in other areas of the country?
Well, the honest answer is it's too soon. We've had folks ask us to consider an Encounter 360 on the West Coast, which I'm sure you'd be happy about.
Absolutely.
We've already gotten overtures from the United Kingdom because we got so many writers and connections over there. So we've decided that we're going to kind of walk before we run. We want to see what wisdom we get out of this thing here. We're leaning forward towards doing more, but we don't think we're smart enough yet. We want to see what happens now, how it goes, what we should have done differently. And since we've done most of the heavy lifting and kind of mapping out how you put it together, that was all new to us. We think we can take that model forward and just do it again at the right time and in the right place.
Well, I know that there's thousands of people who would love for this to be something that is an ongoing event, even if it's just annual, that it's an annual wherever it happens to be. There's so many folks that I've interacted with that I would love to just sit down.
Oh, you can imagine.
A cup of coffee with.
That's it, Frank. And, frankly, the gathering, we're going to have people that are going to help stir the crowd. We don't call them keynotes. These are people that are going to step up and do some interactive work. And every topic is different from what you would ever expect. We want people to walk away saying, wow. But let me just say, underneath all of that, that's nice to have. It really is what you just said. It's the opportunity to be in the same room with these people, and what happens after the day's over, before the day starts, in between the day, those interactions that build friendships. And back to your question about, are we going to do more elsewhere? I think by virtue of the fact that we just announced this thing 5 weeks ago and it's almost sold out, I think we've validated one of our theories that people do feel isolated. But we also validated they don't want to go back to the same old stuff.
Yes.
And with that that's telling us we're probably onto something here, but we're not going to be arrogant just yet. We want to keep some humility going, figure it out, see how it goes, and then take it in the next step.
Outstanding. And just keep and it seems to me this is how the whole organization grew. It was a layered approach. We tried this, and it worked out pretty good. Let's see what the feedback is. And what's encouraging to me about this organization is the willingness of people to give constructive feedback.
Amen. Amen. Yeah, we couldn't have put this together with the number of people that surrounded us when we let the word out we were doing this. They've stepped up and said, I would like to come and I would like to speak to the crowd, and I would like to help you with this if you've never done this part of it. If you need the hotels, I know this. Simply remarkable. We had a lot of goodwill out there, and frankly, we didn't know that. And we knew we had it out there, but we've never really felt it the way we've just felt it in the last couple of months of putting this thing together. So remarkable experience. And
it absolutely is. It absolutely is. Well, Dennis, this has been incredible. We're just about out of time. What last words do you want to leave with the viewers around the world and all the people that are part of your organization?
That's another good question. It's a very deep one, Frank. But, we've said for a long time as we've been building this thing, and first of all, never be under the illusion we have any idea what we're doing. There is no model. There is no business plan. It's amazing how people want that. They want to know that immediately. Said it wouldn't work if we had a plan. We want to be a little bit different, and different comes from, it's not always perfect. But we've said for a long time, Frank, that our job is to figure out from this perch we have what the world is trying to be, and then help the world be that, and maybe a little bit better and a little bit more. And we think the world depends on people like you and me, every single one of us, to just show up, step up, be present, and do the best you can to create what we call positive ripples of change. It's not that hard. We can all do that. One person, one voice, one step at a time. Absolutely. It's amazing what can happen when one person starts
a discussion and with a positive feel. It's not the
Exactly.
yelling and screaming and pounding on the desk. It's
Exactly.
here's what I believe, here's what I think, here's what I've observed, and let it go from there.
Well put, Frank.
Wow, this has been amazing. Well, as I said, we're just about out of time. I want to thank Dennis so much for letting us know that,
Hey, you're welcome.
that nothing is hopeless when we bring people together for open and honest and
Yeah.
adult dialogue. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you can see this show on Roku TV. You can see it on my YouTube channel, Frank Zaccari. If you go to YouTube, please subscribe, and Dennis will put it out on all of his links out
We will.
on the 360 world. Now, let me leave you with this, as I do every week. None of us are in this alone. And the secret to walking on water is to know where the rocks are. And today, Dennis showed us where many of those rocks are. Join us again next week as we discuss more secrets for walking on water. Thank you again, Dennis.
Frank, thank you.